And here we are. How are you, sir? Hello. You are muted.
There we go. How are you this morning?
No, it's very infrequent that you have nothing to say.
That's pretty rare.
Yes, how am I? We're doing okay. We got back, I'm sure you know, as of today. Today is Tuesday. So we got back about 50 hostages that were kidnapped on
Yes.
October 7th over the past 4 days. I heard earlier today, or maybe last night, that Israel and the Hamas have both agreed that they will extend the pause, not ceasefire, but the pause in fire for another 2 days in order to release another 20 Israeli hostages. Of course, in parallel, 60 release 60 terrorists from Israeli jails. However, a moment before I came onto the video onto the Zoom with you, I heard on the radio that there was an attack by Hamas on Israel. So with 3 soldiers wounded. So it's quite possible that we're not going to continue on with the this pause in fighting. In other words, we might return to fighting.
Yeah, I just read that there was some sort of an explosive that was detonated around some soldiers.
Where did you see that? That's what I heard.
I follow Amir Safardi and his feed on Telegram, and he keeps us all pretty updated on what's going on. Pretty solid information, I think. So
I wonder if he doesn't. I wonder if he doesn't have either a team of people or some sort of a bot, because you can't be awake 24/7.
yeah, I don't know how he does it, and but he has some sort of connection where it's getting him information. That's for sure. A lot of videos. He's a good one to follow for sure.
But it's only on Telegram, huh?
Well, that's the only place that I'm aware of that I think he's got some YouTube channels where he distributes some content and things like that. But most of his, constant communication is going to be through Telegram.
I hear that. Okay, so maybe I will bite the bullet, pardon the expression, and subscribe to Telegram.
Yeah,
I'm already I I have a Telegram account, but I do Facebook and YouTube and WhatsApp and Twitter, and like I don't have time for anything else.
I
So
know.
he's out there.
That's the only thing I use Telegram for is to follow him.
Just
So
him. And even that takes up all your day.
yeah. So what's the general thought on here's one thing I've always been baffled by is whenever countries negotiate exchange of prisoners for someone that's being held hostage. The United States does this all the time. It's never a one for one trade. It's never we'll give you one, you give us one. Why is it always we'll give you one, we'll give you two? I've never understood that concept and idea. Is there a thought about that, or in this case 1 to 3, right? Isn't it a 1 to 3 ratio?
Listen, Israel in the past, most recently for Gilad Shalit, they gave 1,000 for one, 1,000. And I understand that earlier in like the 60s or in the 50s or something like that, they gave like 4,000 for like something like crazy. The thing is that in Israel, there is a lot of pressure to get back our hostages. And so we value our hostages, and they don't have any. First of all, they don't have any hostages. They have criminals. They have people who are in jail.
That's
Who
an
have,
important delineation. Very important delineation.
of course, it's very important. So so they say, listen, we'll give you somebody, but you got to ante up. Now, why the rest of the world is not saying, okay, we have to go in with a coalition? I mean, when Iraq was fighting, when Iraq invaded, where was the Kuwait in the beginning of the 21st century, then it was one of the President Bush, I don't remember if it was the first or the second, he got together a whole coalition of armies, and that coalition fought against Iraq. Now, what Hamas has done now, I mean, I haven't done a real study on it, but I think it's much worse than anything else that's happened in since the Holocaust. Again, I really have to say that that is a phrase that has been used over the past few weeks. But I have to say, being more truthful, it's the only thing that the West has paid attention to, in spite of itself, perhaps, since the Holocaust. And that is because I think there's a lot of stuff going on, not in the West, in Africa and in Asia, where people are slaughtering each other. And if it makes anywhere in the paper, good, certainly isn't going to make the front page. And I don't remember anything like, who cares? They say if it's Jews, it's news. And that's what it seems to be. But to actually do something about it, I don't see. I think that the United States went to war against Iraq. Well, I have my idea. What do you think? Why do you think that the United States went to war against Iraq in the beginning of the 21st century?
Why did they go to battle? I mean, we had obviously the attack in New York City. I think there was a required response, and I think that was the most calculated response that they could make. Now, I'm probably really naive to all of this as to why they actually went and attacked.
I think it might. I'm surprising both of us. I think that they didn't attack Iraq after the World Trade Center. I think they attacked Iraq after Iraq attacked Kuwait. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, but I think that was before that, wasn't it?
Right. I think so.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think, yeah, you're right. It was 1990, I think.
Yeah, because obviously the World Trade Center was 2001.
Right. Anyway, so they attacked Kuwait.
And I was in high school / college at that time, so
yeah,
I wasn't nearly as up to date on international affairs.
They attacked Iraq because Iraq invaded Kuwait, and Kuwait was where the oil is.
Oh, sure, yeah, sure.
So we're doing it all for money, but the value of these horrific terrorists killing babies and children and hundreds and hundreds, over 1,000 people who are totally guiltless. Everybody's saying, well, maybe they deserved it. That's what it seems to be happening over here. I mean, really, everybody should be saying, Israel, we're willing to send you 1,000 troops. We're willing to send you 100,000 troops. What do we got to do? Or, you know what? You don't want us to fight on your land? What else can we do? But they should be lining up to say, what can we do to fight this horrific thing? Instead, they're saying, I don't know, maybe the Israelis had it coming to them, and maybe it didn't really happen. I just saw somebody said that it didn't really happen, but it should have. That kind of thing. Crazy.
Yeah, I think you probably have opinions all across the board. You have some countries that are 100% appear to be 100% aligned with Israel. You have others that are waffling, and then certainly the other end of the spectrum that are obviously more in line with what Hamas believes or the Islamic community believes. that the thing that always baffles me is it seems as though the United States is usually the one that is always committing resources to these battles and these wars around the world. In some cases, very justifiably. In others, it's debatable, right? In this case, certainly not debatable. But I've always wondered why more countries don't jump in with the resources, that the same level of resource commitment that we make as a country. And that part is frustrating for me. Is, where is the money? Where are the weapons? Where are the warships? You don't necessarily have to commit men and women into the battlefield like you're talking about, but why aren't other countries making the same commitment of resources that the United States is? And that's frustrating for me as an American.
And even in the United States right now, I've seen, and here in Israel is getting a lot of airtime, President Biden saying, we're going to stand with you, Israel, and all that. But we're hesitant here in Israel. We're wondering how long that's going to last. And especially now that, again, I haven't checked Amir Sarfati in the past 10 minutes, but I don't know what's going to happen now. And for all I know, Biden should have said, well, you should have given it another. Nobody got killed. I mean, what, they got a little boo-boo. No big deal. You should have let it fly.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going to happen?
And that's my concern as well. Is it appears as though, again, at least this is the way Amir is positioning it, is that it appears as though America is really pushing forward a continuing or a lengthening of the quote unquote ceasefire. And I know Israel doesn't want to use that word. They want to use more of a word, pause, which I understand. It's a pause in their mission. It's not a stopping of the mission.
Right.
And I agree with you. I'm afraid that where Biden and the administration is eventually going to land is a desire for a two-state solution, and I just know that's not on the agenda for Israel.
They've said that very clearly, very clearly. That one of the spokesmen for the United States government said that the only solution is a two-state solution, and that is not it's a non-starter.
Yeah. And it's by that agenda, in my opinion, is going to be the hardest agenda to sell internationally.
Which agenda
is
that? No two-state solution.
Yeah, I agree. There should be no two-state solution, but I'm saying that's going to be the hardest solution to sell internationally, for sure, without question.
The solution to sell internationally is keep your nose out of this. If you guys would just not pay so much attention, then there wouldn't be as many problems here. Simple as that. The fact that there's hundreds of cameras on every kid who blows his nose in the West Bank, then of course they're going to put on Hollywood and we're going to look bad. But the thing is, I'm sorry, I really believe that so much of the world is simply, as they are traditionally, anti-Semitic, and they just want to catch Israel with a double standard and make sure that they look bad. And if it's possible to get Israel out of trouble, well, maybe there's a way that we could keep that from happening. Because that's what the two-state solution is going to happen. And that's what a ceasefire now is happening.
Yeah. Yep. And we talked about this a call or two ago. The interesting thing is nobody wants nobody wants to take these Palestinian people. No country, Egypt, Jordan, nobody wants to take them, and so that's part of the problem. Is where do they end up? And so let me ask you this: what would you say? I'm asking you to represent maybe a population that it's impossible for you to represent, which is in the entire Israeli viewpoint on this, but maybe your own viewpoint and maybe some of your closer friends. What's the solution for the West Bank? What's the Jewish solution for the West Bank? If the Jews could wave a magic wand today and it's all solved, what does that look like, do you think?
I think that, first of all, there should be much more freedom for Palestinians to emigrate. I think that a lot of them could want to find a better life for themselves elsewhere. Number two, there are a few solutions that I've seen people brainstorm. One solution that I saw is a kind of what's the word? Breaking Israel and the West Bank down into cantons, like sort of like mini states, and making it in a way that the Jewish state will always have a majority, but those smaller cantons will have more freedom to behave and to run their own lives. I'm talking about the Arab ones and the Palestinian ones, and maybe there would be some sort of a electoral college. But the problem is that everybody is saying, unless every single Arab, including the ones that tomorrow are going to be murderous terrorists, unless every single one of them has absolutely the same amount of democratic rights than the Jews have, which theoretically could mean say no more Jewish state. In other words, they could vote the state of Israel out of its Jewish existence. Then we're not going to allow that. The whole world is going to say that's not democratic enough for us. Even though it's clear that most, if not absolutely all, Arab countries are not democratic, at least in a way that Jews could live there and maybe we turn that into a Jewish state. So it's just, again, not fair. Simply not fair. But really, the solution would be for there to be a peaceful Palestinian state in the West Bank with Jews living here, like me, for example, being able to live here, not be afraid for my life, and vote in the Israeli parliament. And that's it. In other words, if you have, I was just today taking a look at the map of Alaska. Did you know that how far down Alaska goes, abutting British Columbia? Like 3/4 of British Columbia is like the archipelago or something like that of Alaska. So there, and I'm sure there are plenty of other places in the world where you have a little bit of this country next to a little bit of that country, a little bit of this city next to a little bit of this city. So what's so bad about me living here and my friends over there in Bani Naim, just across the road, living there, they're paying taxes to their municipality. I'm paying taxes to my municipality. They're paying taxes to their federal government. I'm paying taxes to my federal government. Federal isn't the right word over here, but my state government. And we like, I have another friend who is right on the border between I don't know, two states. So, or I recently visited Kansas City. There's two Kansas cities right next to each other on both sides of the Missouri and Kansas border. So they don't cross over all the time. Is there like a gate there saying if you're from Kansas, you're not allowed into Missouri? What are you talking about? Everybody drives Chofshi as much as they'd like to. Why can't we do that over here? When we can do that over here, then we'll find a simple solution. Until we can't do that, because I'm afraid that these guys are going to kill me or my children, then there's no time to talk about solutions.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
So today, that A territory that you're next to, so do they, I'm sorry, I'm speaking out of ignorance here, but so do they pay Israeli taxes?
Some of them, people who work here, and they can work here, they pay income tax from their income or something like that.
So in an A territory, a Palestinian living in an A territory, working in a business in the A territory is paying okay, where am I wrong there?
I know. If you're working for an Israeli company or an Israeli employer, again, I'm talking a little bit about out of ignorance myself. I have to tell the
Okay.
truth, but I do know that Israel collects taxes from the PA from Palestinians, and then passes it over to the PA, the Palestinian Authority. And from
Okay.
time to time, the Israelis say, "Listen, you guys are taking this tax money that we collected for you, and you're paying it as a salary to terrorists and terrorist families. So we don't want to do that."
Where's the
But
Palestinian Authority located? Is it in Gaza?
No, officially the Palestinian Authority has authority over area A and B in
Okay.
the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip.
So they have offices and locations right there in West Bank.
I'm sorry?
So they have offices. Palestinian Authority has offices there in West Bank somewhere.
Oh yeah, in many places.
Okay.
There are about a dozen big cities in the West Bank, big Arab cities: Hebron, Nablus, Jenin, Ramallah. There are probably a few dozen smaller villages, and then a lot of smaller hamlets or something like that.
Okay.
Altogether, you got about 1 million people, 2 million people living there, or something like that.
So this community. Sorry, go ahead.
But in area A and area B, they could live their own lives. There's a slight problem that from time to time, when they are traveling, then they reach the toll booths, and there's a long wait there. I don't know. Sometimes you get to a toll booth and you have to wait a long time. So these aren't toll booths. These are security passes,
right,
to make sure that there aren't people passing through with bombs or guns. And Israel tries its best to make those passages as humanly convenient as possible. But we're talking about security-wise over here. Sorry, my security is more important and my family's security is more important than anybody's convenience, including my own. I also have to pass through these passages.
It's interesting perspective. So this community that's next to you, you mentioned it here this morning, this A territory that's beside you right now. What I know you guys aren't just buddies anyway, even in times of quote unquote peace.
Right.
What's the climate right now between these two communities that are so closely next to each other?
I'll tell you. I'll be quite frank. I'm a good old fashioned American liberal with the classic liberal position of we should live and let live, and we are all brothers, and we should try to be friends with each other. And when I moved here, I said I want to meet my neighbors here in Bani Naim, and I kept on looking around for people. Listen, I'm not going to go in there. There's a big red sign that says Israeli Jews are not allowed into this community. But and it's dangerous. But I meet with Arabs in other places, in Hebron and in Gush Etzion. So I was looking for somebody who I could speak in Hebrew or in English with, and just to get to know them. And I've been here for 10 years, and people from time to time said, "Oh yeah, I can do that. That's not a problem." But they're not. Nobody's delivering. And unfortunately, out of Bani Naim have come a number of terror attacks in our area and also in other places. People live there and they say, "Hey, we're gonna do this terror," and it's tragic. But I hope to meet people. I like to be friends with people.
Well, I just saw some. This wasn't on the news. This was through Amir's feed. And he does a nice job of warning you in advance. Well, he'll have the screen that's scrambled and says there's some very disturbing images, of some things that are taking place, and be careful before you touch the screen. Yes. And so one of the stories I was looking at, this is kind of to this point, is there was 3 or 4 individuals in Gaza that were Palestinians that were accused of fraternizing and or in some cases helping Jews, and they were all of them were lynched. I mean, in not just lynched, I'm talking just abused in multiple ways.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's that mindset that's woven through that community that anyone that is seemed to be a Jew fraternizer is probably ridiculed at the least, and other consequences.
The term that comes to my mind is savagery, savage hatred.
Yeah. Well, I just try to imagine, this is what I tell people here in the States when I talk to them about what's going on over there, is just try to imagine your next, the community that's next to you, and there's a sign posted that says, anyone from your community that passes into this community, A, you're not welcome, B, there's a chance you'll die.
Yeah.
And why that's even allowed within a country blows my mind. And I realize it's much more complex than
why it's even allowed in a world. Why can anybody look aside and say this is
country to country, let alone within a state itself, how that's even
individuals? Why could anybody see that and say how can that be? How is that okay? So much hatred that somebody's going to kill you.
Well, you know what'd be interesting? It'd be interesting if there was a sign on the other side of that sign that said the same thing, just the opposite. Any Palestinian or any Arab that crosses over into this Israeli territory, A, you're not welcome. We don't want you here, and B, there's a chance you'll die. I wonder how the world would respond to that. I bet it would be a lot different. I bet the Jews would be absolutely lambasted for taking that position. How in the world could Israel do this to these Arab people? It's a double standard that blows my mind.
Absolutely. Now I'm telling you, you've heard of this phrase from the New Testament, turn the other cheek.
Yeah.
And love your enemy. So those are not, that's not in the Jewish canon. However, it seems to me that the entire world is expecting the Jews to behave that way. And the fact is that the Jews do behave that way in spite of ourselves. And I don't know that we're not the only ones who do.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter, the Jews are never going to please the world. I mean, and you know that better than I do. That there's nothing you guys are going to be able to do that's ever going to change the mind of the world. And so there's only one person you have to answer to, right? And that's God himself. And at the end of the day, as long as you can continue to remain obedient to him, his promises are that you will not only receive provision, but protection. And I know you know that. I'm preaching to the choir on this one, to use a Christian term, preaching to the choir. But you understand what I'm saying. And that's a tough position to take, man, because it's against our flesh. It's against everything that we feel, every emotion that we have. We want to lash back. We want to give them what they gave us. And that's a really hard position to take. It really is.
Israel has been in a difficult position since before it was founded in 1948. And Israel, which is the another term for the Jewish people, have been in such a terrible situation since before we were founded 3,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago. So it's just part of our DNA to fight with both hands tied behind our backs. And what they say, whatever doesn't kill me makes me stronger. And we, as individuals, of course, have been killed multiple millions of times throughout the centuries. Here's a copy of that book. I think I've showed it to you in the past. This is called The List, Persecution of Jews over 2,000 years of Christian history. Over 1,000 examples of that all throughout. But we just keep on going. And since we as a nation, as a people, have not died, have not been killed. Therefore, we only get stronger and stronger. And especially in our time, where we are the actual realization of Ezekiel's prophecy of the dry bones who were dead, who seemed dead for such a long time, yet God has brought us back to life and brought us back marching to our land to recreate ourselves as a society, which is what that prophecy is. Is that you're familiar with the dry bones prophecy?
Oh yeah.
Is that the is there a Christian understanding of that dry bones prophecy that is not the way that I just described it?
No, I think that's incredibly accurate. And I think we're seeing that, part of what we believe to be true from the New Testament, that part of the prophecy that will be fulfilled is the returning of Jews to their homeland, which obviously we're seeing. You're an example of that. You yourself,
Absolutely.
you're a living example of that. And we're seeing more and more Jews that are coming back to Israel, which just points to the fact that we believe we're closer and closer to the end times.
Yeah.
I was changing gears slightly. There's an ad campaign that's running in the United States right now, and it's pretty significant. There's a lot of money behind it, and I don't know who's behind it. Maybe but there's an ad campaign around this idea of stopping Jewish hate, and it's really
stopping hate against Jews or by Jews.
Sorry, yes, stopping hate against Jews, and it's an interesting campaign. It puts a lot of statistics up on the screen. For example, one of the ads that I saw the other day, comes up and it says Jews represent only 2.4% of the population in the United States. And then the next graphic, it's all just graphics on the screen. There's no words, no spoken words. And then the next statistic that pops up and says, since the October terrorist attacks, hate crimes against Jews in the United States is up 388%. And so it's this campaign to create awareness around anti-Semitism, obviously. And then there's a variation of that ad, same campaign, that also, which I appreciate, which also speaks to just hate in general, right? Not just hate against Jews, but hate against Muslims, hate against minorities of all types, right? And there's also a campaign that's been going on in the NFL, National Football League here in the United States, which I think is an interesting campaign. And then I'm leading up to a question for you that basically says stop hate. And it's not geared or directed towards any one people group. It's just this idea of stopping hate. And I've always been a little bit interested and fascinated by that campaign, because I'm like, you don't just stop hating. You know what I mean? There's a root cause behind the hate that someone has towards a people group, a minority group, a whatever, whoever it might be. And so just the fact by saying, okay, we just need to stop hating, I appreciate the sentiment, but it's so much deeper than that. Anyway, I'll stop. I'm just curious as to your response to what I've shared so far.
It's hard for me to say, because I'm a person that feels that I don't have hate in my heart. I feel like I just want to, if you hate me, then I want to stay away from you. If you don't hate me, then I want to try to be your friend. And I don't want to hate anybody. Hating somebody is punishing yourself for somebody else's bad behavior. So I'm not familiar with that personally.
Yeah.
And so the people who are into that kind of thing, it's just a tragic shame for their own lives. They're really punishing themselves more than anything else.
What do you think, in your opinion, is the root cause of hate?
Like I said, I'm not much of an expert on hate, but I think that there's it's just a lot. I think it's immaturity, frankly.
Okay.
I think that, like my 4-year-old grandchild, my grandson, if he doesn't get the way what he wants, then he immediately starts a tantrum. So if people grow up and they say, okay, listen, that's who I am. I throw tantrums from time to time. Then they're just and if it's acceptable that people are throwing tantrums all over the place, then that's the way it's going to be. I think so.
I put some thought to this, and there's a couple of other things that I think are the root cause of hatred. One is, and this is similar to what you just described, but slightly different. And that's just pure ignorance, right? You've either heard a narrative from someone else, and you kind of go, yeah, that makes sense to me, and then you just parrot the narrative. There's a lot of that going on right now. Another form of ignorance too is you're raised to believe a certain thing,
right,
without investigating it more on your own, right? If your parents and their parents and their parents' parents all grew up hating blacks, for example, and you're raised in this household that we hate blacks, and there's no really reason behind it other than just we hate blacks, that's a form of ignorance, because you're just buying into a narrative and an ideology that you've never taken the time to research on your own or to have your own experience. You just draw a conclusion, right? It's just based out of ignorance. And those are deadly, and they're tough to break, those chains, and it's generational, right? But then there's a third one, and I'm sure I'm oversimplifying this idea of hate, but just for the sake of this conversation, the third one I think about is, and I think it's a big part of what we're seeing today, especially as it relates to the Jewish people, and that's spiritual, right? We have this demonic spirit that it's not even about, I mean, it is about hate, but it's about death and elimination, right? And that's the only thing I can point to describe what's taking place globally right now towards the Jewish people. It's a spiritual issue at its root core that is satanic. That since the beginning of time, Satan himself has wanted to kill all of God's people. And the fact is, and this is my point, is, in the New Testament, it talks about, our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities of the air, specifically demonic. So therefore, we can't fight, this battle with weapons of this world, but instead, we have to tap into the spiritual forces to be able to fight this battle of hate. I'm not talking about wars. I'm talking about the battle of hate. And so I think that's what we're seeing globally, specifically as it relates to Israel.
I've definitely seen and certainly heard of former Muslims who were raised with this, as you said, demonic and rabid hatred for Israelis and Jews. And then they became believers in Jesus. Yeah. And it was like scales came off of their eyes or something like that.
That's the only hope. That's the only hope for hate is a spiritual awakening. Because I don't think there's enough education. I don't think there's enough classes. I don't think there's enough arguments that can be had, enough debates that can take place, enough political agreements that can be put in place that's going to solve it. To your point, back to the two-state solution. Some sort of political arrangement is not going to solve the issue of hate that the Palestinians or the Arabs have towards Jews.
It can't be a solution. It has to be a foundation.
Interesting. Yeah. So
anyway,
therein lies the complexity.
Talking about spirituality, I have to go to my afternoon prayers by now.
Good.
And I'm going to change our meetings to we have them now for an hour, but I'm going to move them over to 3/4 of an hour so I can make it to my afternoon prayer. Or maybe we can start meeting a quarter of an hour earlier. If that's, I know, what is it? 4 a.m. you wake up? What is it?
No, I get up at 6. We jump on at 6:30 my time. So
So I'm not going to make you get up any earlier than that.
Well, I appreciate that. We can squeeze it in 45 minutes.
That's right. That's what we've been doing.
All right, my brother. Shalom.
Thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing you next week.
Take care.